Podcasting is more than just talking. It's listening. BSing with Bob Schmidt.
The $1 Million One-Person Business. Make great money, work the way you like, have the life you want. Elaine Pofeldt wrote the book, and it came out earlier this year. I had the chance to talk with her on my radio program and enjoyed the conversation so much I thought I'd invite her on and be a podcast guest. Elaine, thanks a lot for being on with me again. And I really enjoyed the conversation we had last time. Just finding out about some of the businesses and some of the people that you spoke with. I shouldn't even say businesses because they were people. They were one person that ended up with a $1 million one-person business. What a cool concept for a book.
Bob, it's great to be back. I really enjoyed the conversation, too, and I thought you asked great questions about small business, so I'm glad to continue the discussion. I really kind of stumbled upon the idea for this book through my coverage at Forbes. I write about the one-person business for Forbes, and in doing my blog, I came across statistics from the U.S. Census Bureau that showed that there was a certain subset of one-person businesses that was bringing in more than $1 million. And I got very curious about it because I knew a lot of one-person businesses and they were not bringing in that much. And I said, what are they doing that's different from what the average small business is doing? What industries are they in? How are they making money? So I started slicing and dicing the data. And I was able to find out about the industries, but not really exactly what they were doing. So through my blog and other coverage, I asked readers to get in touch with me and tell me how were they breaking 1 million in a one-person business. And that touched off a journey that lasted for the past several years. It was about 3 years ago that I first started writing about it. And it was so interesting to find out what they were doing because no two of these businesses seem to be alike. They're across many different industries. So it's been a lot of fun.
So Elaine, do they, you say that they're not alike, but do they have the same sort of beliefs or the same set of rules that they follow? Or is there some common thread that weaves back and forth between, the multiple businesses that you spoke with?
Absolutely, Bob. That was what was so interesting. The main categories that I found of businesses that are breaking 1 million are 6: e-commerce, manufacturing, informational content creation, professional services and creative businesses, personal services firms, and real estate. And those would seem to be completely different types of fields, and they are. But what they have in common is that the owners have thought about how to scale what they can accomplish beyond what one person can ordinarily achieve. And they're doing it with free and low-cost resources. One of them is outsourcing. There is also automation. There are a lot of tools that can help you run a business more efficiently today. And they're also relying on a network of other freelancers who are helping to support them and whose businesses grow when they get business from the original business. So it's quite interesting. I think a lot of resources have come together in the last few years that make this so much more possible than ever before. And that's what's so exciting. The number keeps going up. There were more than 35,000 of these businesses in 2011, and the number increased by 33% by 2015. And that's still a small number relative to the millions of one-person businesses in the country, but the growth is really exciting because it shows us that if we learn from these businesses, more people can accomplish what they did.
Oh, absolutely. So, Elaine, is it fair to say that they're one-person businesses if they're using other freelancers to do the work?
I'm using the U.S. government's definition of a non-employer business. So technically, there might be a whole web of contractors that support them, but in terms of how the business is structured, they don't have any W-2 employees. Uh-huh. So it could be a business that is a single person, which most of them are. In some cases, they're partnerships, so they would still be considered non-employers if the two owners are the only full-time workers in the business. So I use the government's definition, but you're correct in that this is not a lonely, isolated trend. People who are running these businesses are very connected to other business owners, and they have very active communication with others. They're not locked away in an attic somewhere running their one-person business. It's one person on paper, but like everything in life, it involves a network of other people.
The first time that I ever heard of outsourcing and having somebody else do some work for you, when I first read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, he talked a lot about, getting other people or hiring other people to do stuff and only checking your email, one time a week and things like that. Are you finding that a lot of people are using those types of strategies in order to achieve their $1 million business?
It's funny that you bring that up, Bob, because if you look on the Tim Ferriss blog, there's actually a guest post that I did for Tim about some of the owners in my book who were originally inspired by reading the 4-Hour Workweek. I think he really put these ideas on the map, because when he wrote that book, it was now 10 years ago, a lot of these resources were just coming onto the scene. It wasn't that easy at that time to find freelancers online, for instance, or the automated tools that some of the entrepreneurs in my book are using were not around at that time, where they were just becoming available. Not everybody had mobile phones at that time. It seems hard to imagine now because they're attached to us most of the time, but there were a lot of resources not available then. So he kind of woke people up to the idea that they could do this. And his timing was impeccable, because now all of a sudden a bunch of these resources came onto the market and people could use them. And they started becoming very creative in tailoring them to their own business. And so the idea of automation, for instance, I use a tool called Schedule Once to schedule my appointments when I do a phone call for an interview. That's an automated tool. Another person who might be shipping products might use a shipping app to package up the products correctly, with the right labels and that sort of thing, to save time on that front. So it can be very industry specific too. And I think the people that do well with this really become a student of these different tools without going totally crazy, because they still have to run a business. But they look for the ones that really have a high impact and will spend the money for them if they cost a little bit, to free up time to think about the bigger picture of growing the business.
Right. Elaine, I'm guessing that a lot of people that pick up your book want to know, what kind of idea can I come up with, or will the book help me to, come up with my own $1 million idea? Do you have any ideas on different businesses that you could start, or perhaps if you have a business already going that you'd be able to parlay that into perhaps $1 million business?
I addressed that because that was the number one question when I was working on the book that people would ask me. They would say, I would love to start $1 million one-person business, but I need an idea. How do I come up with my idea? And so the appendix of the book has some exercises that will help people uncover their $1 million idea. It isn't that easy. There isn't just a set formula where you do this one thing and bingo, you have $1 million one-person business. But what I recommend, based on what the entrepreneurs in the book did, was to think about your various skills and gifts. Everybody has some things that they're good at, and some of them they're being paid money for at the moment. Some of them might be things that they give away freely, as a volunteer, or they do for their family, or use in other contexts, like it's an interest of theirs. And then think about which ones you would be willing to monetize. There's certain things that you might do that you love and enjoy and are your passion, but you don't want to make them into a commercial enterprise. Maybe your yoga practice isn't something that you want to turn into a moneymaker. You do it for yourself, to renew yourself. So you have to think about what things you could handle in a commercial way comfortably. And then you need to think about the market. If you were to turn your skill or the product that you create into something to sell, is there a market for it? And you need to do a little bit of market research. And fortunately, it's very easy to get market research reports these days. It will cost you a few $100s, but they're very thorough. And they'll give you a sense of whether people are buying what you have to sell. If you're doing a brand new product or service that no one has ever heard of before, you can beta test it. And one example of how to test the market was a company called Brooklinen that I profiled in the book. It's run by a husband and wife team, and they came across a set of sheets that they loved that were really expensive. I think they were like $800 for the set of sheets. And
What?
they said
$800
yeah,
for sheets?
that's a lot of money for sheets.
You got to be a millionaire in order to have those kinds of sheets.
Or a million thread count, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, and so they said, well, we love these sheets, but they have to be. There should be a sheet of this quality that's available at a lower price point. So here's our market opportunity. And they started researching how sheets are made, and they found out there are a lot of middlemen in the sheet making process that add to the cost. So they said, well, what if we go with a direct-to-consumer model and come up with our own? And so they basically taught themselves this whole industry by reading books and articles and talking to people. And they went to the floor of some big home goods type stores and surveyed people and said, how much would you be willing to pay for a set of sheets? And I think it was about $100, that most people said they'd be willing to spend. And so they came up with sheets in that price range that they sold direct to consumers through their website. And one of the things that they did that was a little different than a lot of the other sheet makers was make patterns that appeal to both men and women, because apparently women buy most sheets. Mm-hmm. And they came up with designs like window pane plaids and things like that a guy would buy too. And the business just took off. They wound up raising venture capital. They're no longer a one couple business anymore because they grew so fast. But that was how they came up with their idea. And I think it was a passion, but their life previously did not revolve around sheets. It was something they were interested enough in to research and live with every day as their business.
Well, isn't that what they say? In order to have an awesome career is to do something that you love to do and figure out a way to make money doing it. And I mean, it sounds kind of like that's what they've done. Have you found that?
Yeah.
Have you found that to kind of be the case with a lot of these people that you've talked with?
Yes, I think so. But I think what I found interesting was they have a few things that they love, and they figured out which one was the one they wanted to make money from. Mm-hmm. So Camille and Ben Arneberg run a store called Willow and Everett on Amazon, and they're a young couple. They're very athletic. Their first business together was selling running compression sleeves, which are an inexpensive accessory that goes around the arm when you're running to hold things to your arm. And no one really bought them. And so they realized that although they like this type of accessory and they love running, they couldn't turn that passion into a business that people were going to support by buying the product. So they pivoted and they said, well, what else are we interested in? And Camille is interested in photography. She has a photography business also. But they didn't see that as the scalable business they would do together. And they also loved having friends over for parties, and they would buy, they like buying decanters and mugs and things like that to accessorize the table. And so they decided they would sell those types of things on Amazon, and they did that, and it took off. And they would test each product to see what would sell. They'd order small amounts, and then if people didn't buy the product, they would sell it for a discount and then double down on the product that did really well. And that was how they built a very successful business. And I was so happy to get their email one day in my inbox. They told me they got to 1 million in about a year after starting. They set a goal to get to 1 million, and they did it. And now they have other businesses too, and they're advising other people in startups. It led to a lot of good things for them, but it wasn't a straight path. I tell that story because I think it's important for people not to give up if their first attempt doesn't work out. But the way you insulate yourself from that is don't spend all your money on the first thing that you try. Do it in a small way and test the market, and then see what the market says. It does make you feel vulnerable when you put something out there. I feel that way when I put out my book. You think, okay, now the court of public opinion is going to judge it, but you have to take some personal risks in order to start a business. And then you might be surprised by what people respond to. You. Some little product that you introduce that you don't think anyone will like will become your big hit. And then maybe something you thought everyone would like might have some unexpected difficulty that it comes with when it comes to selling.
Right.
So you do have to experiment a little bit.
Elaine, have you found that the majority of people that you talked with had that one thing that they weren't sure was going to make it, and then that was their big product, if you will?
Yes, I think that was pretty common with them. I mean, sometimes they had a main product and they were pretty certain it would sell, but there were iterations of it. So, for instance, one of the businesses is Tools for Wisdom. It sells stationery and planners on Amazon. And the founder, Laszlo Nadler, designed many planners, and some of them have done better than others, and I'm sure that the one that was his personal favorite may not have been the one that always sold the best, because it's, it goes out into the marketplace and people will choose what they like. But when he finds out which ones do well, then he will bring his attention more towards that product. And I think that's very common. I think also sometimes people start out with an initial product and they make some mistakes with it, like they may charge too little for it, for instance, or they don't package it right. And then they learn from that mistake and they'll improve it and make it more profitable. And they keep on fixing it continually until it's really at its peak as far as bringing in revenue for them. But it's a learning process. These people, I think, are all lifelong learners, and they're very open to feedback and don't let their ego get in the way. I mean, it's hard because you can become very passionate and invested in what you're selling, but if you really listen to the market and to your customers, they'll tell you some very interesting things.
Oh, I bet they do. So have you found that there's a thread of failure that maybe runs through a lot of the people, that they find that failure and turn that failure into a positive?
Definitely. I think that anybody who wants to start a business has to cultivate resilience in themselves, because there is a lot of rejection in being in business for yourself. No matter what you do, even if you're in a so-called safe business, you could be an accountant in your own accounting firm. But when you're pitching your business, some people will say no, and you may have clients that don't like what you do or criticize you on Yelp or whatever it may be. I mean, we're in the age of feedback, so for better or worse, you're going to get a lot of feedback and rejection. So you do have to bounce back, and I think a lot of these folks did figure out a way to bounce back. It doesn't mean they don't feel the hurt when somebody rejects what they put out there, but they develop a thick skin and just say, I'm committed to this. And the other thing, Bob, that I think is really important to say is that they don't always dive in 100% and rely on the business for their income from day one. I think that's a mistake people make. Sometimes people feel like, I'm so passionate about entrepreneurship, I'm just going to quit my job. Or they feel like, I hate my job so much, I'm going to quit and put up a shingle and work for myself. And then all of a sudden, it's really sink or swim. And that may be okay if you're alone and you have some savings. But what if you have a family you're supporting? That affects other people too. Or even if you're supporting yourself and you have no savings, you could be in a pickle pretty soon if you approach life that way. So I think some of them were very smart in starting the business on the side, and then when it picked up traction, quitting their job when it was bringing in enough income to support them. It sounds cautious, and I know entrepreneurs are risk takers, but I actually thought a lot of them mitigated the risk and gave themselves the runway they needed so that if the business didn't bring in money right away, they didn't have to just close up shop. They had money coming in from their job or from a spouse's job or some other source, so they could keep it going.
Now, you mentioned that, close up shop. Are most of the businesses that you had the opportunity to talk with, are they shop owners? You mentioned shingle, putting up the shingle, or are they doing their sales and whatnot online?
A lot of this takes place online. The e-commerce stores are one that I mention a lot because I think that field is probably the most accessible to anyone. Obviously, somebody who's got a retail background would probably have more knowledge to start with, but that's something where you don't necessarily need professional skills that you would get in like a business school or somewhere like that. You can learn it on the job. Manufacturing is another area that's really taking off for one-person businesses. I just interviewed somebody who is a nurse who was working with new moms who were nursing the babies and had a support group for them, and she came up with a product called booby bars. They're to help the women with the nutrition they need to support lactation.
Oh, I saw her on Shark Tank.
Oh, yes, she wrote to me about that. Well, I wrote about her in Forbes, and she got to 1 million on her own by outsourcing the manufacturing of the bars to a co-packer. And I just got a press release from her saying that Walmart was carrying them. And I just think this is sort of a modern miracle that somebody at home, a mom with, I think she has 3 children, can be a manufacturer who is making a food product that's carried in Walmart, and it doesn't have any employees. It's all totally outsourced to a co-packer. A co-packer is a professional manufacturing firm that handles all the details, making sure you're meeting food safety requirements, et cetera. And they charge a fee, but basically it means she doesn't have to have all the infrastructure of General Mills or somebody like that. So it's such a great equalizer. So the other areas that people can pursue are informational content creation. This is something where people with many types of expertise are getting to 1 million. So, for instance, you could do an online course about something that you do in your work. Maybe you're a fitness professional. Maybe you're an accountant or an attorney that has certain questions that come up all the time, and you feel this would benefit your clients or other potential clients. There's a lot of avenues now where you can market your expertise in a video course, an online course. ClickBank has a lot of informational products that people put up there. There was someone in the book called Justin Goff who did a diet and fitness book that he worked on with a personal trainer, and they put it up on ClickBank and got to $1 million very quickly. Of course, you have to have quality, because things are not going to, if you just put up anything, it's not going to do well. But if you really know your stuff in a certain area, it would be a good idea to think about how you can turn that into a sellable product. And what Justin told me that was very interesting was the book that he put up on ClickBank was very simple. It was, I think, a PDF format, actually, and he didn't go to a lot of expense in terms of packaging it. It was just the quality of the information sold it, and they marketed it successfully on Facebook. So I think all of us have certain things that we know a lot about. So if you take inventory of, where are you an expert? It could be in a hobby like model railroads or something like that. You might be able to sell it. And professional services, that's an area where it would be hard to get into unless you have the training. But if you're a professional at a company and you're tired of working for someone else, you could go out on your own. There are a lot of professional services firms in the high 6 figures that also can break $1 million. Personal services like coaching type businesses, for instance, a nutritionist, someone like that. Those types of professionals can do quite well a lot of times by creating an informational product, because when you're trading time for dollars, that's where it gets very hard to get to $1 million, because you only have so much time, unless you can charge an astronomical hourly rate, which maybe you can if you're a crackerjack software developer serving Wall Street investment banks or something like that. But most professionals can't charge $1,000 an hour. So you want to get beyond that type of thinking and think about how to sell what you've already done more than one time without a lot more effort.
So the whole residual income. So if you can just kind of like the McDonald's version of it, sell the same thing over and over and over and over again.
Exactly. Yeah. I just heard from a copywriter who was in the high 6 figures, and I asked him how he had done that, because, maybe the average writer in the U.S., I think I saw a figure might make about $50,000. So if he's in the high 6 figures, he's probably making more than 10 times the amount of the average writer. And what he said was he was doing online courses. So once he developed the course, there's a certain amount of front-end work into creating a course. But once it's created, if you market it successfully, then you're selling it over and over. So yes. And, I also think it's a good way to bring in clients that might not be able to afford your services, because sometimes somebody maybe couldn't afford to put a copywriter on retainer or even hire them for a project, but might want to learn how to do something in-house.
Right.
So for all those do-it-yourselfers that you can't serve and you're turning away, maybe there's another way to work with them. And then when they have more budget, they can come back to you and do the full service version of what you have to offer. The one last area that, that a lot of people are getting into is real estate. There are quite a number of people that are breaking 1 million in real estate. And one of them in the book I mentioned was Corey Binsfield, who lives in Duluth, Minnesota. And he started out, he's also a financial planner, and he bought his first property many years ago when he was new in business. And then he kept on reinvesting in more real estate. And now he has 116 rental properties, and it throws off a nice income from him. And he considers it a hobby. He goes skateboarding. He loves skateboarding around Duluth, and he calls it skateboarding for dollars. He looks for properties that might be up for sale, and he's even started consulting and advising other people on properties that they're thinking about buying. So that's one that might be good for people that have some money to invest. Maybe you've saved up some money for retirement and have more than enough right now, and you want to do something that keeps you busy, that could grow and increase your nest egg even more. That could be a good option.
Elaine, a lot of people have extra gigs, as they're called now, rather than part-time jobs, and the whole gig economy that's out there. Do you do anything on the side? Do you own a business at all?
I do own a business. Yeah, I've been in business for 10 years. I'm a freelance writer, and I started out mostly doing journalism. I write for publications like CNBC, Forbes. I've written for Money and Fortune, and I branched out to some other things. So I now do content marketing, and I do ghostwriting. One thing to be aware of if you are not in business but are thinking about going into business is you probably won't end up doing exactly what you thought, because so many fields are changing rapidly right now due to technology. So the media industry, as I'm sure you know, Bob, is in total upheaval right now. And it's bringing a lot of new opportunities, but some of the old ways of communicating are fading out. So if I stayed a newspaper journalist, as I was at the beginning of my career, I wouldn't have much of a business, because a lot of the newspapers are in trouble. But I write for a lot of online publications now. My ghostwriting is using the same skills, but for a different purpose. I've branched out into book writing. Content marketing uses a lot of the same skills. A lot of times I'm writing the exact same types of articles for people for their website that I would have done as a journalist, but I'm just doing it under the name of content marketing. So I think it's important that you evolve continually when you run a business, and keep on changing with the times. And if you do that, you'll have a thriving business. My business has done very well, and it gives me a great lifestyle. I have 4 children, and so I have a really busy lifestyle, and I'm able to have a very flexible work from home lifestyle because of the business.
Right. Well, and it's funny because you'd mentioned the whole media thing, and media has changed. I've been doing radio for the last almost 30 years, and started off doing music radio, then kind of moved myself into talk radio, and now kind of getting myself into podcasting, and actually starting a business, podcastforhire.com. So I hope to eventually do more of these types of interviews for people that are looking to get their message out there, and to help them kind of get their message, to the masses by podcasting.
I think that's a great idea, Bob, because I think podcasting is really exploding right now. I cannot believe how many people are doing podcasting and doing it well. It's a really great way to get your message out. And I think there is a demand for people who don't know how to do it, to get help from people that are experienced in radio like you are, because there are, like in any field, tricks of the trade as far as a great production. So I think that you'll find you have quite a bit of business as a result of that. And I think some new things will come out that we don't even know about. And I think it's so important that as you're doing whatever you're doing, you keep on paying attention to all the new things that seem so new that you shouldn't even try them yet, but be open to trying them.
Well, I appreciate that. Is that what you found with a lot of the successful entrepreneurs, that they were able to maybe take a new technology or a new fangled idea and turn that newfangled idea into money?
I don't think that many of the people in the $1 million one-person businesses were really turning brand new ideas into money. A lot of them kind of jumped into an idea when it was maybe a year or two old. For instance, the e-commerce entrepreneurs, it wasn't brand new, but they were early adopters. I would say. And it's important sometimes to get the first mover advantage in any new business. You don't want to be like the last to the party, because by that point there'll be too much competition. But if there is something you really want to do and it's already being done widely, what you can do is try to find a niche that's very narrow, but you can do really well. That can help a lot. And in the book, I interviewed David Fairley, who's a business broker, and he was telling me about all the different businesses that he sells that have done quite well in e-commerce, and they're selling things like muck boots, which are special boots for walking through the mud, or ceramic garden gnomes, and all kinds of crazy things that you wouldn't think there would be enough people to buy, but they do buy them. And what he told me, which I thought was really interesting, is how you can compete with the Amazons of the world is to really bring your skill as a curator to the product. So if you know something really well, then people come to trust you instead of sorting through a giant website that has every product known to man. And that's actually what Alan Walton did. Alan Walton started a store called Spy Guy. He's I think he just turned 30, but he was in his 20s when he started the business. He had been a retail clerk making $11 an hour, selling spy cameras in a store, and he learned all about spy cameras and which ones broke and which ones didn't break, and then he took another position, and then he finally decided to start his own spy camera store online. So he was able to really pick the right cameras and give very knowledgeable advice to his customers. So the business took off, and he got to $1 million as a one-person business. Now I think he's up to about 3 people, because he needed customer service people. But the point isn't to stay one person. If you prefer to be one person, you definitely want to be in a high revenue business because you need the insulation of the high revenue. Mm-hmm. But if you reach the point where it makes sense to scale, I am the first to say go ahead and do it, because a business is a journey and it's dynamic, and opportunities are going to open up, and sometimes it makes sense to just keep on growing.
Elaine, I want to ask you, your chapter 2 is titled "What Makes $1 Million One-Person Business Work?" So can you sum that up and give us an idea of what makes that $1 million one-person business work?
Well, but what makes them work is really the mindset of the owner. Somebody who just goes into business to do what they love but doesn't really think about growth is probably not going to get to 1 million. You have to be thinking about the business side of things more than many entrepreneurs do. I'm a creative like you, and so I think maybe it's not our nature to be looking in our QuickBooks all the time and that sort of thing. Maybe we find it a little boring. But if you really want to grow a business like this, you have to be on top of those things. And maybe it's getting a bookkeeper or a really good accountant, but you do need to set goals for growth, and you need to evaluate whether your efforts are working. These folks were very good at looking at metrics. If they introduced a product, they were looking at whether it was really selling and not just continuing to sell something because they loved it, even if no one wanted it. And I think it's really constantly thinking about how do you protect your time to work on the big picture of the business and strategy, growth, marketing to key customers, and stay out of the weeds. And that's tough to do when you don't have employees. It's a little easier to do when you have an admin and you have people sitting around you. But if you don't have the budget to hire employees, then you need to think about, okay, so how best do I handle this task? For instance, the scheduling of appointments. I was thinking of hiring an admin to do it because I have to schedule so many appointments. But then I thought, well, there's some weeks where I don't have many appointments, so what would that person do? And I thought, well, I could get a virtual assistant, which I've still thought about, but there are times I'm busy and out and about, and I really wouldn't have much for them to do. So what I did was that scheduling app for now, but there could come a point where I need to schedule so many appointments, and it's so complex with the app that I really need a person overseeing it. So they think like that in terms of constantly minimizing unimportant work, because nobody's going to be like, oh, I regret that I missed out on all that scheduling when they get to the end of their life. Oh, right. Darn, I should have spent more time calling people on the phone to find out if they were free at 11 a.m. on Tuesday. And so you want to think about those types of tasks that you have no regrets about not doing, that really don't take a lot of brain power for someone to do, and would be just great to offload. And those are the ones you want to automate. If they do take some personal skills and brain power, then you might need a person to do them. And so for instance, the scheduling, if there's some politics to how you schedule things or nuances to it, then you need somebody, who can think through those things and think, we need to protect that window of time for so-and-so or whatever it may be. There's some executive decision making you have to make, but you should be making those types of decisions all the time so that you can keep on focusing on the big things. I found it also interesting that these folks have learned that they need time to recharge. I think there's a tendency when you're in business for yourself to never turn down work and always feel like you have to be making money. And they will take time away and go to events for entrepreneurs, to be around other people who think entrepreneurially. They'll network. They get out of the office. They take time for sports and fitness and things like that so that their brain is clear sometimes and they can look at the business from a distance. And for some people, it might be spending time with family, where they're really engaged with their family and not also on the phone with work. It's a matter of having some perspective, because when you get lost in the weeds, that's when all of a sudden, you're just running it on a hamster wheel. You're not running a business that's really supporting you and a great lifestyle. You're basically an employee of yourself. You don't have anything better than you would have had in a job, but you have all the stress of the responsibility of bringing in your own income. So you want to think about making it bigger than just you creating a job for yourself. It's got to be a business that you've created for yourself, and one ideally with its recurring revenue.
That makes a lot of sense. So Elaine, who should read the $1 Million One-Person Business?
I wrote the book for anyone who hopes to start a business or who's running a business but isn't getting out of it what they want yet. I think that hearing from these real entrepreneurs who have gotten to $1 million will be so eye-opening. It really was for me as somebody who's had a business. I learned so much from them, and they were so generous in sharing what worked for them that I think anybody who reads it will come away with at least one thing that they can implement this week in their business that will make their business serve them better and help them have a better lifestyle.
Elaine Pofeldt is the author of the $1 Million One-Person Business. Make great money, work the way you like, have the life you want. Where can we pick this book up?
The book is for sale on Amazon and major bookstores. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
The BSing with Bob Schmidt podcast is brought to you by Orange Computer. Find them online at orangecomputerlax.com.
This has been another podcastforhire.com production.